You would do well in that um Restaurants at the End of the World show with Kristen Kish. You would be good. I mean, just hanging out with Kristen Gish, I think, really is what you'd like to do. But also having an idyllic, beautiful restaurant on some island where all of the flowers are beautiful all the time and people have to take quaint little boats to bring you stuff. You could thrive in that environment, I think.
That'd be fun where you have one dinner service a week.
And people pay just out the nose to come see you, and the rest of the time you just get to live on your idyllic island where no one bothers you.
When I lived in Copenhagen, I lived in like a musician's commune,
Mhm.
and we had this like local Danish musician who would come and sort of like teach us about the Danish music scene because it was all a bunch of American musicians. And she was talking about for her wife's like 35th or 30th birthday, somewhere in there, she took her wife to Noma, which, has been the best restaurant in the world for years. I don't think it technically is any longer, but and the uh head chef of Noma is um her like third cousin or something.
Damn, okay.
Like they know each other from like big family reunions, and apparently he doesn't cook at family things.
Yeah,
It's his day
understandable.
job. He's not going to cook at family things.
Mhm.
His wife apparently is very good in the kitchen as well, and she cooks at all the family things. But uh, our mentor was saying like, she had been saving up. She'd been preparing to like get this huge bill at the end of the meal, and was very drunk because it's like wine pairings with every one of these like 25 courses, and they'll come out and be like, and so this course is this random thing you'd never think of, and this course, and now you can munch on the plant that's at your table that's actually edible. That's the next course.
Oh my god.
um, and but she said she would, got to the end and the check came out and it was just a big zero with a smiley face inside of it.
Amazing.
So her cousin was like, yep.
That's awesome, and I wanna know what she did with that money, because that's
I
not an insignificant bill.
no. It was, hundreds upon hundreds of kroner.
Yeah.
Um, I remember Googling at one point, like, what a plate at Noma was, and it was obscene. Anyway, this is unfortunately not a foodie podcast, although I'm sure I will probably talk about food on this episode, I think.
I mean, I did just cook and eat an obscene amount of potatoes, and they were very good, and hopefully I didn't make a dairy mistake, but they were really delicious, and I think it was a worthy Hobbit meal, so,
Yeah,
food is
because
always relevant.
as we've heard, the Gaffer Gamgee, is the the local expert on the growth and harvest of potatoes.
Yeah. It's an important skill, important knowledge base.
It's incredibly important, to hobbit well-being. And you know what's also important to hobbit well-being?
Hmm.
The favor of Galadriel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, uh, before we jump in, do we wanna give an intro?
Oh, yeah, I suppose we should do that. Tell people what show they're listening to.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of The Fandom Apprentice. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Ryn. I'm your resident quote unquote Tolkien expert. I grew up reading Tolkien and appreciating his works, and now I'm here walking Sam through Fellowship of the Ring.
That's me. I'm the apprentice. Hello.
Sam has never read this, but now you're here in episode 10, so I think you probably have a pretty good um, handle on what we're doing here, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm a real fan now, except I can't go into any kind of internet fandom space because I'll see things that are spoilers. So, not fully realized, but almost read this entire book. We only have 2 chapters left. Um, and then, of course, there's 2 more books, or 4 more if you want to be specific. But
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 chapters that we're theoretically covering today, although we said that last time,
and then we
and
talked for an hour and a half about one chapter. So, we'll see.
yeah, but today we are, in theory, covering The Mirror of Galadriel and, Farewell to Lórien,
Hmm.
and we'll get as far as we can get through all of them. Do we have any announcements before we begin? The podcast has been out for a week now.
Hmm.
And we've gotten some lovely responses from friends and family who've listened.
Yeah. Yeah. Things are continuing apace. I don't think we have anything specific housekeeping y.
No, I don't
By
think
the
so. I
time
sort of
people are
like had a
hearing this, I don't think any
yeah.
announcements we have will be relevant.
It's not an announcement relevant to our podcast, but I literally saw it as I was sitting down. SAG-AFTRA might have reached a deal with
Oh,
the AMPTP,
hell yeah.
which would be great. We are incredibly pro-union in this household.
Absolutely, yes.
So we support the SAG-AFTRA strikes. We support the Writers Guild strike that previously occurred. So you can now date when we recorded this podcast episode by us talking about this. But we here at the Phantom Apprentice believe that workers should be paid for their work. They should be paid fairly. They should be paid a living wage. And having $1 billion is inherently immoral.
It is impossible to work a billion times harder than another person. The only way that you can get that money is by exploiting people. We are very passionate about this. There's no such thing as unskilled labor. Art is important. I mean, we've dedicated a very significant chunk of our lives to talking about art. Obviously, we think that. But yeah, we get real heated about this shit. Everyone should unionize. Do it. It's fun. It's sexy. All the cool people are doing it.
Working on it. Um,
Hell yeah.
so shall we get into the Mirror of Galadriel? We
Yes,
left
we
off last
shall.
time in Lórien.
Yes.
Uh,
So my first line of my notes is, "Are we going to meet Galadriel?" in all caps, which obviously we do. Her name is in the chapter. And then my second line was, "I know about her. She's the really pretty one, and everyone wants to cosplay her," which obviously she's more than a pretty face, but that is true. I think that anyone who has ever done any kind of fantasy adjacent cosplay has seen cosplays of Galadriel, has wanted to cosplay her. She is she is it. She is the person who everyone wants to be, and I love
it
that.
helps that she is one of only a few women in this entire series.
I have
As
strong takes about that we will get
yeah,
to.
as much as an immortal elf queen can be a woman.
Literally, brain cell. Yeah, no, we're gonna get there. I have thoughts.
Yeah, I also have takes about that. We'll get there shortly. But this sounds like the greatest treehouse ever.
Yeah.
When they go up to talk to Celeborn and Galadriel,
Hmm.
they're very Oberon and Titania.
I don't know who that is.
The prince and the king and queen of the Fae, specifically in Shakespeare, but drawing from older sources.
Oh, Titania is also a boss in Final Fantasy Shadowbringers, Final Fantasy 14 Shadowbringers, which I played a long time ago. So I know that because I kind of killed her in a pretend video game, but that's not the same.
Fair, fair. Yeah. Yeah, they appear as king and queen of the fairies in Midsummer Night's Dream and have some various and sundry other mythological references to them, but that's sort of my immediate thought when thinking about these two is because I feel like the elves of Lothlórien are much more fey than we've experienced with elves before.
Yeah, and we talked about that last time too.
Yeah.
They're very much their own class of beings.
Yeah. And I have some comments about that in the next chapter as well.
This is a grave that we're digging for ourselves. We can't keep saying we're going to talk about stuff from the next chapter because that just prophesies that we're not going to get to it.
It just means come back next episode, listeners.
Yeah, no, it's strategy, it's marketing. We're so good at that.
Oof. Celeborn greets them all by name as they enter,
Hmm.
and then says, you know, but there's only 8 of you. There was supposed to be 9. And then it says, you know, he says, well, maybe we misheard. And Galadriel says, no, we haven't misheard. Something happened to Gandalf. I can't see him anymore.
Hmm.
And Aragorn says, Gandalf the Grey fell into shadow. He remained in Moria and did not escape. I do also want to call out 2 things from
Okay.
as we're introduced to Galadriel. They were clad wholly in white, and the hair of the lady was of deep gold, and the hair of Lord Celeborn was of silver long and bright. But no sign of age was upon them, unless it were the depths of their eyes, and they were keen as lances in the starlight. The line right before that. Very tall they were, and the lady no less tall than the Lord, and they were grave and beautiful.
Hmm.
And then one of the lines later, Lady Galadriel speaking for the first time. Her voice was clear and musical, but deeper than woman's wont. I hereby assign Galadriel trans.
Amazing.
Which this is not to say that there are not cis women who are tall with deep voices, and that all trans women are tall with deep voices. But I'm a trans woman, and I have a deep voice, and I'm of middling height. So uh, I am hereby assigning Galadriel trans.
Phenomenal. Yes. Seconded, approved. All the stamps have been stamped. Yes.
Also, Galadriel's a witch queen. She has some ability where she can see for miles.
Yeah, she is incredibly powerful. And it's kind of, I don't feel like it's outright stated, but basically confirmed that she's either really insightful or she can straight up read minds. Maybe mortals are just really bad at concealing their emotions and everything is written plainly on their faces. But there's a couple of times where someone asks a question, no one says anything. And then Gladriel goes, ah, yes, I see. And everything is just apparent to her.
She will sort of get a little bit of this sprinkled throughout these couple of chapters of just how incredibly old she is.
Hmm.
She spent time living in Valinor, which is the continent over the sea that used to be there when the world was flat, and now only the elves can get to because they're the only ones who can follow the straight road now that the world is curved.
I see.
We talked about that on a previous episode.
Hmm.
That the world was made round after at the end of I think it was the Second Age, and now only the elves can get to Valinor because they
Yeah.
can still treat the world as flat. Um, it's a whole thing. She's lived in Valinor. She's lived in Middle Earth, and we'll talk about it later. But she is the mother of Celebrian, who is the previously unnamed wife of Elrond.
Yes, yes. I was doing a little bit of wait, okay, so Aragorn is talking about her having this kid, and then wait, is she uh Arwen's grandma? And it's like,
Yeah, so she's Arwen's grandmother. And we'll
yeah.
talk more about that later.
She
Again, digging our
loves her
grave here.
grandson-in-law, adores him.
Yeah. Um, Aragorn hasn't been there in 38 years, apparently.
Hmm.
But, that's a fucking drop in the bucket to Galadriel.
Yeah.
I feel like we've seen ancient beings before. We have Gandalf and we have Elrond, and they're also both powerfully magical. And we've seen characters like Beorn in The Hobbit who have these magical abilities of, shape changing. But for whatever reason, Galadriel's abilities feel so much more. I'm making like hand motions
Yeah,
here
like
in our video
wizard
call.
fingers conjuring some kind of spell.
Everyone knows the wizard fingers.
Yeah, you know.
But Galadriel, like, I feel like of all of the immortal characters we've met so far, Galadriel, Tom Bombadil, and Old Man Willow are sort of the 3 who are on the closest level with each other.
They're kind of the more primal forces, I feel like.
Right. She's
Also,
so old, she has become a part of the world itself.
she's really sensitive to everyone's thoughts and emotions. Like I was just saying with her mind reading thing, Tom Bombadil is aware that mortals sometimes need help. Old Man Willow doesn't give a fuck about anyone or anything, but Galadriel really just deeply cares about everything that's going on in her realm. And that's really interesting. And, maybe she only cares because the stuff that's happening is relevant to the fate of the entire world. But it just seems like she's a really kind person and a good leader.
Yeah.
And I mean, we see this from the very beginning plot wise because we've barely scraped the surface of the first, couple paragraphs. But when they come up into the Awesome Treehouse, they get Galadriel and Celeborn up to speed. And Celeborn is pissed about all of this news because he doesn't seem to share Galadriel's awesome seeing everything powers. And he basically says the same thing that the first elf said. Just like, if I had known a fucking dwarf had awakened the ancient evil again, I wouldn't have let you all come here. And then Galadriel basically goes, "That sounds like a you problem," and starts talking about the beauty of the old dwarven empire and the old dwarf
Right.
buildings and
Right.
really steps in and changes the tone.
Yeah,
And
the
then,
dark is the water of Keledzarum, and cold are the springs of Kibelnala, and fair were the many-pillared halls of Khazad-dûm in elder days before the fall of mighty kings beneath the stone. I don't know why this phrase sits in my brain,
mhm,
but it doesn't matter how long it is since I've read the books, how many years, like, the one phrase that I always fucking remember is "Dark is the water of Keledzarum, and cold are the springs of Kibelnala."
mhm.
Don't know why, I think it's Galadriel being magical.
And that's just such a gracious and thoughtful thing to say. And, talking about the okay, I literally forget the things you just said. What was dark and what was the other thing? What were the adjectives?
Dark is the water of Keledzarum, and cold are the springs of Kibelnala.
So, talking about the darkness and the coldness, she is so intimately familiar with dwarf culture that she knows that those are high compliments. That she is not just grasping for random things to say, she's really being specific and intentional with her praise and saying things that are really meaningful to Gimli. And I'm like, hell yeah.
Well, and Gimli said literally the exact same phrase earlier in the
Mhm,
book when he's describing Keledzarum, which is the mirror, that we talked about last time.
mhm.
So Gimli says this before they go into Moria. And he says, "Would that I'm able to look upon it." And
And then I wrote down the line from, or a couple of lines from immediately after that. She looked upon Gimli, who sat glowering and sad, and she smiled. And the dwarf, hearing the names given in his own ancient tongue, looked up and met her eyes. And it seemed to him that he looked suddenly into the heart of an enemy and saw there love and understanding. Wonder came into his face, and then he smiled in answer. He rose clumsily and bowed in dwarf fashion, saying, "Yet more fair is the living land of Lórien, and the Lady Galadriel is above all the jewels that lie beneath the earth." Like, that's a pretty intense exchange of, I don't know, words, kindness, pleasantries, compliments, and it fucking owned. So not only
Mhm.
did she say this awesome stuff, it moved Gimli so deeply that he is stirred to come up with some poetic words. I fucking love this. I love justice for Gimli, and we're just going to get more and more of that. I really love Gimli. I think he's great.
I love that we're getting more of all of the party, but I love that, you know, in the previous book, in The Hobbit, we established the dwarves as fairly dour, kind of no nonsense, straight to the point beings,
Mhm.
right? And we've had that from Gimli so far. We've had, Gloin being happy to see Bilbo and, you know, like pleased to share things with his friend, but he's still kind of like no nonsense, straight to the point, mostly about like the physical and the tangible,
Mhm.
right? And now we're getting to see more of a dwarf's personality
Mhm.
and character growth, I guess, I think that's really fun.
Yeah. And then after all of that, Celeborn does apologize. To his credit, he doesn't double down on his shittiness. He figures out, because it's very fucking obvious, things are chill. Okay, Celeborn, relax, buddy. It's all right. Step down. So then they continue in a more civil way after that.
Yes. Galadriel says, it was I who first summoned the White Council. And the White Council is a group of powerful beings brought together to deal with the dark power that lay in Dol Guldur, which was eventually revealed to be Sauron,
Mhm.
right? So the White Council is made up of Sauron, Gandalf, Galadriel, Glorfindel, Elrond, Círdan the Shipwright, who is mentioned but not present at the Council of Elrond,
Mhm.
and Radagast the Brown.
Okay.
So 3 of 5 wizards in Middle-earth and 4 of the most powerful elves in Middle-earth
Mhm.
to come together. And Galadriel has the power to like be like, "Hey, we all need to come talk about this."
Yeah.
And they all listen to her and show up.
As they fucking should.
Um, and this was hundreds upon hundreds of years ago. I don't have the dates written down, but I think it was like 500 years from when the White Council was first summoned to now, roughly.
Mhm.
Yeah, but she says if it had been completely up to her, Gandalf would have run the White Council,
Mhm.
but it wasn't completely up to her. And she's sort of vaguing that she knows that Saruman went to the dark side.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that.
I think that was just sort of more, that might be my meta knowledge reading into this.
But I like it
Um,
though. That makes sense. And she is really vague about everything. She's really cryptic. And this kind of goes back to first law of fantasy stuff, speaking in service to the plot. She literally refuses to give them advice. She says, I will not give you
yeah.
counsel saying do this or do that, for not in doing nor contriving, nor in choosing between this course and another can I avail. And then just kind of continues saying, I can't tell you what to do, but which fair, I understand, especially with her sort of omniscient future telling powers, whatever she's got going on, there may be limitations to how she can meddle. But it was just kind of funny 'cause she's so nice and she's doing everything she can, but at the end of the day, she just can't give them advice.
Do not meddle in the affairs of elves. For you are pretty and play the lute and will be a fine prize to stay forever in Elfland. um, they leave. They sort of go to rest.
They spend some more time grieving Gandalf, which all the rest of the elves also seem to be doing. They're singing songs about him that Legolas doesn't feel up to translating. Part of it, he says, is just artistically he can't convey it, and part of it is just too much of a bummer. It's too fresh. He doesn't want to say all of the sad stuff that they're saying out loud again.
Yeah, so Gandalf clearly is known to these folk and is important. And so, you know, and it's not just the elves who are singing about Gandalf's loss,
Hmm.
but also Frodo uh, tries to process through poetry, like
Yeah.
any queer teen among us. um, I wrote so much bad poetry back in the day. Um, there was something very Shakespearean about this poem to me.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
It was just in the flow of it. It also very much is clearly not in Tolkien's typical style,
Hmm.
right? There's a more, like, standard rhyme scheme to it, a more kind of standard meter. Tolkien's other poetry messes around with that. So, I think it goes to sort of show, one, how incredible a writer he is, that he can change that up to demonstrate that this character doesn't necessarily have a background writing poetry,
Mhm.
but also that really consistent meter to me felt like Shakespeare. I don't know why reading this specifically made me think of Puck's monologue at the end of Midsummer.
Confession, I don't know what A Midsummer Night's Dream is about. I have never seen it. I've never read it. I know that there's a donkey and some fairies, and that's it. So you will have to enlighten me because I don't know what you're referencing.
If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear, and this weak and idle theme, no more yielding, but a dream. It's just sort of saying, think about this as if you're just sleeping here, right? You were just dreaming. If this was strange to you, perhaps a little offensive, a little bit uncouth, don't worry about it. We will make everything better. And the light of day will shine down and everything will be cleansed.
Mhm.
But I don't know, I think the way that Puck presents that monologue also sort of fit the same roughly the same meter as Frodo's poem for Gandalf.
Oh,
So I
interesting.
guess that's what sort of made me think of it. And I won't read the whole thing here because we've already quoted quite a bit from the book so far this episode. But just when evening in the Shire was grey, his footsteps on the hill were heard. Before the dawn he went away, on journey long, without a word. A deadly sword, a healing hand, a back that bent beneath its load, a trumpet voice, a burning brand, a weary pilgrim on the road. He stood upon the bridge alone, and fire and shadow both defied. His staff was broken on the stone. In Khazad-dûm, his wisdom died. And so Frodo is kind of telling this to Sam. Sam gives him another verse about fireworks, and they sat and mourned Gandalf together as best they could.
Yeah, and Frodo asks Sam what he thinks about elves now, because if you'll recall, all the way back at the beginning, that was the thing that Sam was very excited to see was to see elves and their whole deal. And he basically says, after all of this experience, what do you think about elves? And Sam says that he still likes them, and he likes the way that he feels in Lórien, that it's like being at home and on a holiday all at once, which is very sweet. And I just appreciated that Frodo remembered that and asked him about it. And in the midst of all of this very intense adventuring and grieving and world changing stakes, just taking a minute to ask Sam, hey, remember how you like elves? How's that going for you? Just a little sweet, normal moment.
Well, and then they're talking about, like, how are they doing in feeling this grief
Hmm.
here in this place that seems out of time? And Sam sort of ends this by saying, it's the job that's never started that takes longest to finish. If we don't leave eventually, we're never going to feel the grief.
Hmm.
We've put a band-aid on it here. It feels dulled here because everything's dulled here. Nothing's quite real. There's elves and there's elves. There's Elrond and his folk, and there's the Galadhadrim. Galadrim. I'm gonna fuck up the pronunciation of that, but that's okay because yes, the Galadrim. Galadrim. Also at the start of this little scene, it says one evening Frodo and Sam were walking together in the cool twilight. They're on a date.
Oh, yes, absolutely. They're holding hands. That's so cute.
They're
Yes,
on a
that's it.
date.
Absolutely,
It's a
yes.
date to mourn a lost friend, but it's still a date.
Yeah.
And speaking of dates, I have this earlier in my notes. I don't remember where exactly it is, but it talks about Legolas going and walking among the people of Lothlórien, and often he took Gimli with him when he went abroad in the land, and the others wondered at this change. It's because they're falling in love.
I missed that. I was too distracted by the cool secret mirror and stuff to even notice that line. Yes. Yes, they are. Oh my god.
They're going on dates. Everybody leave them alone to figure their shit out. Also, Legolas is trying to apologize for being a massive dickweed.
Mhm. And everyone notices because everyone's wondering at the chain. Like, oh, Legolas and Gimli going for a walk. Okay, see you later.
Have fun in this pretty place.
We'll all be, that cool treehouse that we're staying in. Yeah, we're just not going to be there for the next couple of hours. Would you look at that? Huh, what a coincidence. Anyway, that place will be empty for no reason. Okay, bye.
There's a spare flat apparently a little ways off.
Hopefully with a thick covering of trees, but I don't know. Maybe they're freaky like that. Maybe they don't care. Maybe elves are very cavalier about such things.
Again, you live to be thousands of years old. Who knows?
But now I'm just imagining I'm I'm just gonna put that away in my brain. Like,
No,
how
no, no,
much is
no.
too
No, no,
much
no.
for
This
this
is the horny
podcast?
podcast. This is the horny podcast.
Like, how much is too much? But okay, so imagine they're up in the flat, right? They're doing their business. And maybe Legolas doesn't care if kind of whoever sees, everything is fine. But then Gimli is not used to that. He's used to like the privacy of being underground, right? It's like a little exposed, a little embarrassed. Then he's like the blushing, flustered one. And I think that's really cute. I think that's adorable.
Well, that's a fun little piece of characterization for you fanfic writers out there.
Yes,
If you
someone get on this. I'm sure they already have.
I'm
But
sure they have.
elven magical lube is probably amazing. So
Yes.
that too.
We've discussed previously between us and the rest of our D&D group, the uses of certain D&D spells in the bedroom.
Hmm.
I have actually a list somewhere, uh, of spells that my wizard can cast,
God bless her. She deserves it.
but I'm sure the elves have similar things that they can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, this is sort of a spoiler, sort of not a spoiler, but this theme of Gimli and Legolas trying to show each other the beauty in their own wholly separate worlds, is going to continue.
I love that. I hope it does.
I really, really enjoy that. I love that, like, that's their date, is
Mhm.
going places that the other one has uh, dreamt of seeing and being like, look at how beautiful this place is.
Mhm.
But anyway, they moving on from our our two couples, our two lovely little gay couples, to the mirror.
Yeah, I mean, kind of returning to the first couple because back to Frodo and Sam, at the
Frodo
end
and
of that
Sam.
conversation, Sam says that he'd really like to see some elf magic. And conveniently, his wish is granted because Galadriel just appears and leads them to this cool secret garden with this cool secret mirror thing. Um, but the thing, and it's of course all stunningly gorgeous the way it's described, like everything in Lórien. But the first thing that really stuck out to me about this little exchange that they have, besides Galadriel just magically appearing, is that she is just so kind and she wants to show Sam something cool. And she says that she doesn't really understand what magic means to Sam because the same word could also be used to describe the deceits of the enemy. But what she has to show
Mhm.
him is still pretty neat. But I like this idea of, and we see it a couple of times through this chapter and the next one, about the word magic not really being a concept to the elves, because that can mean a lot of things. And what they do is so different from what Sauron does. It doesn't make sense to put them in the same category. But as a religious studies person, people feel the same way about ritual or prayer. You know, it's what do these things mean if you're trying to translate them across different cultures and different contexts?
Yeah, but they look into the mirror, the magic mirror pool. Mirror, mirror on the on the kiddie pool.
Oh no.
And Sam sees industrialization happening in the Shire.
Yeah, it's a really upsetting vision. He sees trees being cut down, Bagshot Row being dug up, which specifically, if I'm remembering correctly, Bagshot Row is where kind of the poorer hobbits live. So the gentrification of the Shire, there's some kind of giant brick building being built, and he is incensed, which he should be, because it was really upsetting to read. It has to be even worse to see.
Yeah. Bagshot Row is the sort of like all the hobbit holes that are underneath Bag End.
Hmm.
Bag End is at the top of the hill and Bagshot Row is dug underneath it.
Hmm.
And she sort of has to tell Sam, like, listen, it's okay. It might not be okay, but this may or may not have come to pass, and it might never come to pass. But you have to decide now whether you're going to stay the course and stay with Frodo or whether you're going to go and deal with this. And Sam sort of goes, well, like, I'm staying with Frodo, obviously.
Yeah.
And then Frodo looks in the pool.
Yeah, he does. It's really creepy.
And he sees the eye of Sauron.
And it's fucking terrifying. I I um I think most people are familiar with the idea of the Eye of Sauron. That's one of the most recognizable images from Lord of the Rings. And it had never really inspired any great fear or distress in me, because I just thought, oh, that's the thing from those fantasy books. That's the bad guy. It's fine. Who cares? No, it's like the ring becoming really scary in this book. The Eye of Sauron is really just deeply unsettling, because it's like looking back at Frodo, and I don't even know what it is about it that's so fucked up, but it's really a very visceral experience, especially contrasted against all of the nice, beautiful elf stuff, to then
Mhm.
have this terrible vision. Yeah, no, I
Well,
did.
and do you know
It
what
had the desired
fucking
effect.
and do you know what fucking Galadriel says after the end of this vision where Frodo sees a giant fucking fiery eye?
No, what does she say?
Do not be afraid. Uh,
Thanks.
and this phrase
Helpful.
gets uttered way too much when people see fiery eyes, and I, for one, would like to be told instead that it's okay to be afraid, whether it's one big fiery eye or way, 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 way too many with also far too many wings.
Yeah.
We are talking about biblically accurate angels, which are only sort of biblically accurate, but
Better than little naked babies with wings.
but in about 3 lines, I will return to the "It's okay to be afraid" theme. So just
Okay.
pin in that for, like, 30 seconds.
Ding.
But then she reveals she has a ring.
Yes, she does.
She has one of the 3 elf rings, which could definitely explain why she's like that.
Like that, TM.
Yeah.
That was in all caps in my notes. Galadriel has a ring with 4 exclamation points.
Nenya, the ring of adamant. And it's Nenya business. But Frodo sees that she has a ring and sees who she is and calls her wise and fearless and fair and offers her the ring.
Yeah.
And she's played the game we've all played, which is the, well, what if I won the lottery and didn't have to think about healthcare bills or paying my rent anymore, but with
Mhm.
so much bigger stakes, right? She literally says, like, she's thought about what she would do with the ring,
Yeah.
but never thought that it would come to her, and she goes, "And now at last it comes. You will give me the ring freely. In place of the Dark Lord, you will set up a queen, and I shall not be dark, but beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, fair as the sea and the sun and the snow upon the mountain, dreadful as the storm and the lightning, stronger than the foundations of the earth. All shall love me and despair." And again, here, I think we can start to read nuance into Tolkien's black and white morality, specifically with these ancient fucking beings, right?
Mhm.
She isn't evil or good, she's old.
Yeah.
And the framework that we're reading this story from, that Frodo is coming from, is just completely unable to comprehend her, right? She's, like we said, like Tom Bombadil or Old Man Willow, she's so old and so powerful that normal mortals and even like normal immortals like Legolas just can't fully understand her.
Mhm.
And she's already carrying so much power with Nenya that she's just sort of beyond.
And there's so much nuance to the way she's delivering it too, because at the end, if I get back to, she says basically that, I'm not going to take the ring. I passed the test, she said. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel. She has already made up her mind. This isn't the process of her thinking out loud. It's like you said, she's already thought about what she would do with the ring. This is her vision for world domination. And so there's a little bit of humor there, but there's
Mhm.
also a lot of very serious. I can just imagine the air shifting around her as she's saying this, that she's not fucking around. This is what would happen if she had the ring. Very matter of factly. All would love her and despair. That is what would happen.
Right. It's Frodo seems to get this, but Sam still doesn't. He gets through like this, display of power and the illusions of grandeur. And still like, but you're good. And you can fix things with the power of the ring. And she goes, but I wouldn't stop with fixing the little things. I would absolutely fix the little things, but I couldn't stop there.
Hmm.
Um, and we are all familiar with, even if we don't know it, John Dahlberg Acton, the first Baron Acton, and specifically a piece of a letter that he sent uh, in 1887. He is responding to a bishop, where the bishop is saying basically that we have to judge these powerful people differently. They must be good because they're powerful. He says, I cannot accept your canon that we are to judge Pope and King unlike other men, with a favorable presumption that they did no wrong. If there is any presumption, it is the other way, against holders of power, increasing as the power increases. Historic responsibility has to make up for the want of legal responsibility. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes.
Great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority. Still more when you superadd the tendency or the certainty of corruption by authority. There is no worse heresy than that the office sanctifies the holder of it. That is the point at which the end learns to justify the means.
My skin cleared just hearing that. I love it.
But the line, of course, that we're all familiar with is power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Hmm.
And that's what she's saying here is if she has so much power and she's not good because she has this power. She is good because she does not currently have the temptation for more.
Hmm.
So Frodo gets her and she gets Frodo, I
Yeah.
think, because a little bit earlier, we're about to get to the end of this chapter, but a little bit earlier, she goes, for the fate of Lothlórien, you are not answerable, but only for the doing of your own task. Because part of Frodo's vision was like potentially the end of the elves in Lothlórien,
Hmm.
right? And she's saying, this is bigger than Lothlórien, this is bigger than my people. She's clearly understanding him better than Elrond, because Elrond is laid, like we talked about this in the Council of Elrond episode, where Elrond lays this big fucking fate on him and says, like, "You alone are bound to this quest, and you may not turn back, but your companions can."
Yeah.
Um, and Galadriel goes, "You're on this quest for the fate of the world, and that's gonna have consequences. Like, good, most likely, overall. But there will still be bad consequences. People will still get hurt along the way. But that's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to complete the quest. Our responsibility as leaders is to deal with everything else that occurs as the result of that."
And related to that, she gives them some insight about basically the real reason why the elves are so hesitant to have the company there, because they're a really tangible reminder of the existential threat that Lórien is under, and that they're fucked either way. The time of the elves is coming to an end. Either the company fails and Sauron takes over, or they succeed and defeat Sauron, and their land eventually fades away anyway. And she also talks about how destroying the One Ring will diminish the power of all the other rings. So her ring
Mhm.
is part of what's keeping Lórien so vibrant and timeless. And eventually, when, well, we know that it's when and not if, because we know how the books end. But when the One Ring gets destroyed, her power is also going to lessen and they're going to have to leave. And so that's, despite their best efforts to be hospitable, everyone is going to be a little bit on edge because the bringers of the end are among them. And they're these sweet
Right.
little gay hobbits.
Yeah. Um, I think when you are immortal, right, and you spend so much time in this unchanging world, suddenly having that reminder of change is terrifying.
Yeah. And having it come in this non threatening little hobbity package, sort of the inverse of a very dear friend of mine who was my childhood camp counselor, also your roommate's childhood camp counselor. And she is a chaplain. She's a lesbian. She's one of the cool chaplains. And she worked in a nursing home for a really long time. I'm not sure if she still does. But sometimes people at the nursing home or at the hospital would see her um, before she would come in before they had some kind of big medical procedure and ask her if she was the angel of death. And she would say, "Do you think the angel of death wears a floral cardigan?" And that would sort of break the tension. But this is the opposite. In this case, the angels of death are in nice little cloaks and eating some potatoes with
Yeah.
the fate of the world on their little tiny shoulders.
And with the fate of the world on their little tiny shoulders, we move on to the next chapter, Farewell to Lórien.
Yeah, this chapter is only 10 pages long. And to be sort of meta about the show for a second, we had been talking about, oh, it seems like there's this pattern that we spend a really long time in the first half of the episode talking about the first chapter, and then we breeze through the second chapter. It's just tended to be that the first chapter we talk about happens to be longer and the second one happens to be shorter. This chapter is really short. And so I thought, surely we won't have that much to say about it. And then I took like 4 pages of notes. This is a dense 10 pages.
Oh, yeah. And even before we jump into all of that, I wanna
Yeah,
talk, before we leave Lórien, about the name of Lórien.
please do.
So, Lothlórien means the dream flower, or Lórien is like the land of dreams.
Mhm.
And it's specifically named directly after the Gardens of Lórien in Valinor, which, and we talked about, Valinor is the Undying Lands the elves sail over to. The Gardens of Lórien is the dwelling place of the Vala Ermo, who is also called Lórien, master of visions and dreams. And I love this sort of deity place name,
Mhm.
right? Because it's so common in our world, but I feel like in a lot of fantasy novels, it doesn't, I I don't see quite as much of it. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we're gonna name this, like, this is the town by the river," or like, "This is the great city," and not like after its patron deity.
Mhm.
Um, but this is named because it resembles this garden of Lórien,
Mhm.
the deity Lórien. Um, and like, just to list some examples from our world, Heraklion in Crete is named after the Roman port of Heraklion. which is named after Hercules. Athens in Greece, named after Athena. Apollonia in Crete, named after Apollo. Odense, Denmark, named for Odin. Torsala in Sweden, named for Thor. Torshavn in the Faroe Islands, named for Thor. Los Angeles, the city of angels. Nineveh in ancient Assyria was named for a local patron goddess. Lyon in France is named for Lugh of the long arm or Lugh of the many skills in Celtic mythology. Mumbai in India is named for Mumbadevi. And Christchurch, New Zealand. So, like, this is, and that's just a short selection.
Yeah.
So, I like that, noted language nerd Tolkien is putting this in his book because, we learn as, anthropologists and archaeologists a lot about like what deities were important in pre-Christian religions from place names.
And I think we've talked about that on the show before too.
I think we definitely have. But I wanted to just kind of poke at that because it's fun.
Yes, that is very fun. And I would never have known that if you hadn't pointed it out to me.
Anyway, once again, they're all given the opportunity to bail. And I feel like this is a DM looking at their players going, are you sure you want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Just repeatedly, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And them all going, yeah, we're fucked. Let's go.
And much like they will all bleed for this quest, I bled for this quest in real life because I was reading this chapter at work yesterday. And there are two very sweet kittens at work who have very, very sharp nails. And something was in the air yesterday. They were shredding my flesh from my bones. I got so many deep gouges on my hands that are still very painful. And so I had to stop reading, put the book down, and Google how to safely trim cat nails, which I had never done before. It is not part of my job description to do, but I just couldn't handle it. And so I was like leaning on these cats because my spouse works in vet med. And so I know how to restrain a cat. And so I was like putting them in a lateral hold and like clipping their fucking nails. And then I sent a picture to one of our group chats of just the
Mhm.
tip of the claw and these are kittens. I mean, they're Maine Coons, so they're big, but they're babies. And even just the little bit that I cut off was this fucking razor sharp, hooked, deathly implement. And so I will now bear the literal scars of that experience. That was the price I paid for getting this reading done on time. So I paid my debt.
You are worthy to go on the quest.
Fuck yeah, I am. That's not relevant to the plot, but I had to have my flesh ripped up. So everyone else has to hear me complain about it.
This is the Tangent Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So
But
boats.
yes, boats.
As we've mentioned previously, you and I are both New Englanders. We've grown up around boats. I have not really been a boat person. I've, grown up near the water, um, surfed and swam as a kid, but so, and I'm familiar with boats, even if I am not like a boat person.
Yeah.
So we have these characters talking about, how many of them are familiar with boats,
Yeah.
um, who's done the canoeing merit badge.
And Mary is very bold and pipes up that because they're basically, I think, Galadriel and Celeborn are listing, these are the people who know about boats. They should probably be in charge. And Mary pipes up and goes, "And one hobbit," cried Mary. "Not all of us look on boats as wild horses. My people live by the banks of the Brandywine." And he's like, "Hey, listen, hashtag not all hobbits. I know about boats." And Sam very much is not about boats, but at least Mary is very confident. And I love that for him.
There's literally like the next page, there's a line that Sam thought boats as bad as wild horses,
Yeah.
which I love that little parallel there.
Yeah. And they're going to get some boats that are also light enough to carry because they're going
Mhm.
to have to take them through the woods and stuff, which, yeah, there's lots of boats that are light enough to carry. But also, this is just more very convenient elf magic. We have food that'll last you forever. We have herbs that cure everything. Also, these boats, you'll need to carry them. Just don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Elves are great. They've invented all the best stuff.
Well, and they talk about carrying boats around the rapids.
Hmm.
Um, and I have to tell our podcast listeners, this is another tangent, but I have to tell our podcast listeners about Big Al.
Do I
Have I
know
told
about
you
Big
about
Al?
Big Al? I don't know if I've told you about Big
I
Al.
think maybe it's ringing some bells, but let's hear the story and see if it comes back to me.
So I was, as previously mentioned on another episode, part of one of those youth organizations that does, outdoorsy shit.
Oh, I think I have
And
heard
one of
this one.
those
Yeah.
outdoorsy shit things that I did was part of this youth organization was whitewater rafting. And there were parts, I believe, of the river, where we'd be carrying boats from one part to another. And Big Al was our guide. Um, Big Al was, is probably, you know, over 6'2" and lives up to the name, broad and strong, and man's big. And I have never seen anyone move so fast as he did when someone fell out of the boat. He was on one side of this 9-foot long raft, and then he was on the other side of the 9-foot long raft. And I don't think I saw him move. He
Yeah.
just was. Um, Big Al was also at the time working there over the summer at the whitewater rafting place to supplement his stipend from being a philosophy PhD student.
Yes. Yes, I remember that about Big Al.
And I was at the time, far too young to engage Big Al in philosophy conversation, and honestly still would not be able to now because I know absolute jack about philosophy. But I remember like one of the adults talking to him about it, and they clearly were having the best of times in the back of the boat
That's
talking about
amazing.
philosophy and whitewater rafting.
I hope Big Al is having a good day wherever he is out there.
I hope he's doing well. I hope he's a professor of
Yeah.
philosophy somewhere.
I hope he's
I don't know
tenured.
if he wanted an academic life, but
I hope he's in a union. I hope everyone's in a union. These are the blessings that we wish upon Big Al.
Big Al, if you ever find this podcast or anyone who finds this podcast knows Big Al, just know that you left a wonderful impression on me, and we wish you well even all these years later.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, Galadriel tells them don't worry, but obviously they do in fact worry.
Yeah. And she just
Um,
continues to be really nice, and obviously she's a very, very powerful leader and she's a good leader, but she's not overly formal or pompous. She's relating to everyone pretty well. But just every interaction with Galadriel, I love.
yeah, they talk about sort of Aragorn trying to figure out like, what his role is now that Gandalf is gone. And Gandalf was the leader, and now Aragorn's the leader, but he doesn't have a plan. And then there's the line, and yet what help could he or any of the company give to Frodo, save to walk blindly with him into the darkness? That is the help.
Hmm.
Frodo is also walking blindly into the darkness, and he's not an adventurer. He's not a warrior. He was not made for this. He's a gay little man who wants to drink his good wine and sit in his armchair and blow fucking smoke rings
Yeah,
over
he's
Bag
just a
End.
guy. He's just a dude.
You're
He's not prepared for this.
the help is to watch his back, to defend him, to raise him up, to do all those things that Sam is doing right now to ensure he's able to complete his quest.
Hmm.
Again, which is where Elrond doesn't fucking get it to say, like, Frodo's the only one who has to finish this. The rest of you can go your own way. Um, and I get that here they're talking about like Boromir's going to split off and go to Minas Tirith, and anyone who wants to go with him can go with him.
And I have shit to say
Um,
about Boromir in a minute. We'll get there.
please. But yes, but that is the help. The walking blindly alongside him. Yeah, it's the blind leading the blind, but you can't just let him You can't just say, "All right, bye, so long, good luck, have fun storming the castle," and, uh, hope that he's gonna be fine, right? The whole point of the company and not sending Frodo alone on this quest was that the company stood a better chance of finishing together.
And I'm going to take this in a bit of a cheesy direction for a moment, but I like the way
Please.
that the neurons are connecting in my brain, so we're just going to go with it. I think that is a lesson that is applicable to life in general, because I think that if you are like me, I often struggle when I have a friend who's going through a hard time with feeling like there's nothing I can do. And I know that, that's a common problem that people have, and feeling like you want to do something tangible, you want to help, you want to fix the problem, especially if you're a really anxious control freak. You just need things to all be correct. And, sometimes just being often, most of the time, just being there, like that is the help. Going blindly into the darkness with your friends, with your loved ones, being present with whatever shit is happening, even when it's very far beyond your control, that is valuable. And that's what being a person and having relationships is about. That's what it's for. And I think if you're the kind of person who tends to beat yourself up about feeling like you can't do enough for the people in your life, for the world in general, that maybe is a comforting thought. But
You
to
had
take
shit to say about Boromir.
I do have shit to say about Boromir. Does he not think they should destroy the ring? Because that's what I got out of this fucking shit that he says. I copied a very long paragraph, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he's talking about how he's going to go and try and raise an army and liberate Gondor. Okay, great, awesome, good for him. Um, and his argument is basically, if I stay here with you and I don't go liberate, what is it? Minus? How do you say it?
Minas Tirith.
Minas Tirith. If I don't go liberate Minas Tirith, we're not going to have an army. And granted, an army is not going to fix all of our problems, but better to have it than not have it, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. And so he's puzzling all of this out. There's little use in war and weapons, and the men of Minas Tirith cannot help. But if you wish to destroy the armed might of the Dark Lord, then it is folly to go without force into his domain, and folly to throw away. He paused suddenly, as if he had become aware that he was speaking his thoughts aloud. It would be folly to throw lives away, I mean, he ended. It is a choice between defending a strong place and walking openly into the arms of death. At least that is how I see it. But then
Right.
Frodo catches some weird looks crossing Boromir's face, and he's thinking, okay, your phrasing was really sketch. And so Frodo suspects, and I suspect, that Boromir thinks that they shouldn't destroy the ring and that he can use it. And I don't know if that's what's going on, but that's what it seems to be indicating. And I do not like this, Boromir. No, my friend, we cannot have the ring. No,
I'm gonna hit some meta knowledge into this now, I
please, please
think.
do.
Because, Boromir is a human, and Boromir is more or less a normal, fucking straight up human,
Yeah.
right?
He's not 83 and still looking fine as hell,
No,
presumably.
looking good as hell. Um, um, he is, I think, I mean, and this is the prevailing theory among the fandom, being corrupted simply by proximity to the ring.
Okay.
Because we know that hobbits can resist the ring and resist dark power. We know uh, that Aragorn won't take the ring, but Aragorn is hardier than your typical man. We know that elves have some magic in them, and only the rings of the elves, were never touched by Sauron. The dwarven rings were controlled by Sauron, but there don't seem to be dwarf ring wraiths. So they were not corrupted and turned into wraiths.
Did the Wraiths used to be people?
9 rings, 9 ring wraiths.
I didn't put two and two together on that. I feel very foolish. That's really sad.
They were kings of men.
Oh. Man.
9 kings of men. And actually, the men of Carn Doom mentioned in the Barrow Downs answered to the Witch King of Angmar, who is one of the Ringwraiths.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's who the Black Riders are. They are the Nazgul, they are the Nine, they are the Dark Riders, the Ringwraiths. So Boromir is, I think, he is the most one obsessed with military might and defeating the Dark Lord.
Hmm.
And he is also the least able to resist the call of power.
Hmm.
So, I think the prevailing theory is, one, he doesn't understand what the fuck he's doing. He sees he sees Mordor as an enemy, not as an existential power,
Hmm.
right? So he's got that against him. He's got the fact that he's just a normal dude against him. He's a prince, but he's a normal dude. And he's got the fact that he is spending all of his time next to this fucking ring against him. And those three things together, I think, are what's kind of kicking him in the ass here.
Isn't that the most normal dude thing too? To be like, yeah, I know what's best. I can handle this.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's been we mentioned it in one of the other episodes that like he definitely is used to being in charge and now is in a group of people either who don't answer to him or are equally or way more competent than he is. And he's not taking it well.
He's our one example of toxic masculinity. Cancel Boromir. He's toxic, you guys.
That's a capital P Sam prediction. I'm just putting that there. Boromir gets canceled.
I mean, I don't know if he can. Maybe he'll get canceled by a sword or something. His life will get canceled, but I think his cancellation is up to the fandom. I don't know if that happens in the books, but you're making one of your impish knowing Ryns, so I won't probe
I'm
further
making
into
my
that.
one of I can't say shit. Um, so let's just move on to talking about Cram and Lembas.
Yes, I've heard of that. That maybe is a slightly more niche piece of lore and knowledge, but I was vaguely familiar with it. So that was nice to go, oh, yeah, that's a word that I've seen before.
Yeah, that's Cram is clearly like hardtack of some sort, right? And Lembas is clearly so much nicer based off of Gimli's reaction to it. And I know a lot of like fan bakers typically make lembas as like a type of honey cake with like dried fruit and nuts inside, right?
Mhm.
But it's clearly some sort of like honey cake Cliff Bar type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I've got on lembas, but it's going to be the travel food of choice that we deal with as much as we can for the rest of the series.
Some more convenient elvish technology that they're going to need something to eat. We can't just magic away the fact that they need to eat. So here's this super easy to carry, light little square. You just take a nibble of it and you're good for a while, which I'm not mad about it. I love it, but it does serve some practical storytelling purposes as well.
We are both foodies, like
Yes.
confirmed foodies, but also we're both bitches with depression. And so a little piece of me would absolutely love fucking lembas bread to just have
Yeah.
in my pantry. And I'm like, all right, cool. I've got no fucking energy today. I'm going to have a little square of lembas bread. You know, I worked for a short time doing admin and just general stuff for a tech company. Not the biotech side of things that I'm in now, but more direct tech things. And man, so many of the programmers just replace all of their meals with like protein shakes, and I could never fucking do that.
Mhm.
That's cram.
Yeah.
right? Lembas is very different.
Yeah, it's good. It is. Gimli says it's better than the Beorning's honey cakes. And that is very high praise because we know Beorn from The Hobbit. He rules. His family apparently makes awesome honey cakes. And that also just continues to show that the tone has really shifted with Gimli and the elves. He's praising their food, calling them kindly hosts. He is just housing this stuff. He's eating it so fast, and the elves are all literally laughing at him, going, "Hey, slow down, man. This is supposed to last you a long time."
Yeah. More strengthening than any food made by men and more pleasant than cram by all accounts. It's yeah, these things are given to serve you when all else fails. So yeah, I'd love a little square of lembas to leave in my pantry, but they also get other gifts.
They get so many gifts. I want to start talking about the cloaks because I
Let's
think those
start with
are
the
the
cloaks.
first ones. Okay, so I am very ready to talk about the cloaks. Let's go. So we get another, is this magic? What does magic mean question? Because they're all given these extremely beautiful cloaks. They're awesome. They change colors. They're amazing. They're light. They're cozy. They're great. And in response to, is this magic? The elves basically say, I'm not sure what you mean by that. They are elvish robes, certainly, if that is what you mean. Leaf and branch, water and stone, they have the hue and beauty of all these things under the twilight of Lórien that we love, for we put the thought of all that we love into all that we make. Galadriel and her maidens wove the cloth. And then a few lines later, it says, never before have we clad strangers in the garb of our own people. So much to unpack there. The first is that casually they go, it's not magic. It's just kind of the love and beauty of all things, the inherent perfection of our world. We just low key wove that into the class. But that's normal. That's just clothes, so it's not a big deal. Love that. Love their casual attitude. Love that Galadriel and her maidens wove it. Love the significance of them going out into the world bearing what will eventually become these relics of this civilization, this land that's about to fall. Love so much about that. But the thing that I really want to talk about is a
Mhm.
fucking course Galadriel can weave. Well, we're talking about our old jobs. My first big girl job out of college was I worked customer service for a yarn store that if you are a knitting person, especially if you're a weaving person, you've definitely heard of. It's very, very, very well known. People travel internationally to go to this store. It's a huge deal. Um, and so we sold a lot of weaving supplies. And I took a lot of weaving classes. I learned a lot about how weaving works. And it is intense. And weavers tend to have a very specific, very intense kind of personality. When we got weaving customers in customer service, we would boot them off to the manager or we'd boot them off to people who really, really knew what they were talking about because the weavers would settle for nothing less. Weaving, especially if you're doing it in the US as a hobby, is incredibly expensive. You are spending thousands and thousands of dollars on equipment and materials and patterns and time to find people to teach you all of this stuff. It's really intense. It's very specific nitty gritty math. Weavers, if they're ordering these big, giant, heavy cones of yarn, if it's off by a couple of grams, it's completely unusable because it will fuck up their entire project if they don't have enough because all of the measuring for the warp, which is like the warp is the threads that are under tension. So if you're on a loom and you're looking at the threads that go up and down, not the side to side ones, that's the warp. All of that is measured out super far in advance. And by the time you get to putting those threads on the loom, if your warp is fucked, you're fucked and you have to start all over again. Bad news. So they need to be really specific in their quantities. They need to be really particular about how they're handling all this equipment. It requires a ton of patience, a ton of skill, a ton of expertise. And like, of course, this immortal leader is super good at it. That is just a skill that requires such a specific type of personality to do. I can see Galadriel doing it. And it's not only to be able to just make a basic ass square of cloth, but to weave the light and beauty and love of all things into it. I just really, appreciate that as somebody who knows about weaving, and I love envisioning Galadriel and all of her maidens. And we get a lot of talk about all of her maidens. I love that she has maidens. That rules. Them just all weaving together, I think is so great. And that's just really, it's hard to fully convey if you don't already know a shit ton about weaving, but if you do, those things just go together perfectly. It makes perfect sense.
Sam is our resident Stitch Witch.
Yes. The only thing I don't know how to do is shear a sheep. If I could learn how to do that, I could get the wool from the sheep into fabric. The entire process: spinning, knitting, weaving, crocheting, sewing, whatever. I can fucking do it all. I just don't know how to get it off the sheep. Someone teach me.
This made me think of Gleipnir. And at Sam's quizzical look, I will explain.
Yes, please do.
Gleipnir is the chain in Norse mythology that binds Fenrir, that he will eventually break uh, at Ragnarok.
Fenrir's the big wolf.
Fenrir is the big giant wolf, yes, the
Okay,
son of
cool.
Loki.
Yes.
And it is magically, depending on either forged or woven from the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of women, the roots of mountains, the sinews of the bear, the breath of the fish, and the spittle of the birds.
Okay. Eclectic.
And this is apparently why none of these things are in the world now. It's because they're in the chain instead.
Would beg to differ on a few of those points, but okay, sure.
Yeah, no, anyway. But that was what, like, weaving the beauty the hue and beauty of all of these things into the twilight of Lórien in made
Mhm.
me think of. Also, my other thought was, oh, so they're camo. um, but also, these are D&D cloaks of Elvenkind. This is, and like the the cloak that keeps you, hidden in the wilderness is something that, exists in real life. You can make this sort of thing, and it appears in plenty of other fantasy, and both low and high fantasy, as we mentioned, the Cloak of Elvenkind, but the Ranger's Apprentice series, the Rangers in that series wear cloaks like this. The war cloaks worn by the Clan Mackenzie in the Emberverse saga by S.M. Sterling also sort of resemble this type thing. It's just a cloak that, you know, when you are hidden, it sort of helps the human eye glaze over you a little bit because you look like scenery.
Mhm.
Do you have any other thoughts on the cloaks?
Nothing else on the cloaks. A little teensy smidgen on the ropes, since we are talking about binding and weaving things. They do
Sam finally
finally
gets his fucking rope.
finally gets the rope, which he deserves, and there's a very funny little exchange between him and one of the elves. And Sam is talking about, he's wondering what they're made of. He knows a little bit about rope making. He thinks it's cool. And the elf that he's talking to says, "There is no time now to instruct you in the art of their making. Had we known that this craft delighted you, we could have taught you much. But now, alas, unless you should at some time return hither, you must be content with our gift. May it serve you well." And I think that it's nice that the elves really seem to take an interest in Sam, to sort of
Mhm.
nicely parallel how he's always been interested in them. And that does kind of make me wonder about the class system of elf society, if they are beholden to similar social constructs of servant and master, and Sam being part of the scenery. This seems to be the first time where he's really being treated like a person, and the elves are just generally taking an interest in him and what he thinks and what he wants to know.
Mhm.
And I just thought that that was nice. And, obviously he's never going to come back to learn about how these elf ropes are made, but that seemed to have been a genuine offer that, yeah, we would have loved to teach you about our ropes. That would have been so cool, when you find someone who loves your niche hobby. But I just thought that was a sweet moment.
As you just explained about weaving
Mhm.
to our podcast listeners. They had a basic boat safety demonstration that, anyone who's ever been to summer camp has done.
They have to practice getting on and off again.
Yeah, no. And we have a marching order again, and Legolas and Gimli have their own boat because
Mhm.
they've
They've
become
become
fast friends.
fast friends in their own boat, just the two of them at the back of the order where no one can see them fooling around a little bit.
Where
Yeah.
they can be behind all the stored goods and packs so they can smooch a little bit.
Yeah. I respect it.
But then, they start going, and then basically Galadriel and Celeborn show back up to give them a picnic off and send off. Galadriel sings a song, Celeborn gives them directions.
That song literally gave me goosebumps. It was very moving. I didn't write down anything specific, any quotes about it. It was just really good.
She's talking about Eldamar, which is the land of the elves in Valinor specifically.
Mhm.
Very clearly because she's been there.
Yeah.
But one of the lines is, "Now it is time to drink the cup of farewell." And my brain just went, "So fill to me the parting glass."
Now it's just getting sad hours. Sad hours here on the podcast. That song is so sad.
It's not really that sad a song, it's just slow.
Yeah, I don't know. I just was listening to it at the height of the pandemic and thinking about being near people and then leaving them. Ugh. But yeah,
Right,
no,
you
you're
know,
right.
that's fair, but they drink of the parting glass, and Galadriel gives them gifts,
Mhm.
you know, a magic sword sheath, a name, and a silver brooch for Aragorn, and she mentions her daughter Celebrian had the brooch, and then Celebrian gave it to her daughter Arwen, and then Arwen clearly sent it back to her grandmother to be given to her boyfriend at the hour of need as a
Mhm.
knight's token in the tourney, a lady's favor, a token of hope.
Yeah, I loved that. I loved realizing that she was Arwen's grandmother. I was like, "Holy shit. Oh my god, that's so cool." And Aragorn and Galadriel have kind of a cryptic exchange that I don't know if you
Mhm,
can shed any light on. There's something he wants that Galadriel can't give him. I
mhm.
don't know what that is. Is there more to it than that? Cuz he gets a lot of fucking gifts and it's pretty great.
And it's specifically, he says, like, he wants something that is not Galadriel's to give.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering whether I should. It's Arwen. He's talking about Arwen.
Okay. That's kind of what I thought, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
really cute though. That's really sweet.
he's like,
Like, I'm just
"Listen."
so in love with your granddaughter a lot, and you, like, wanna marry her and stuff, but she's immortal, so, I get it. It was kind of a bummer. This, like everything he says about Arwen, this man drinks his respect woman juice.
His respect, woman asterisk elf juice. Belts of gold, or a belt of gold for Boromir, silver belts for Merry and Pippin. Legolas gets a Lórien bow strung with elf hair, which I love that that's strong enough for that. And Sam, what does Sam get?
Sam gets a box full of earth from Lórien to bring back to his garden. And Galadriel says, this isn't going to keep you safe in battle. It's not super special and exciting and glamorous. But if you are able to make it safely home one day and you're able to bring this with you, put it in your garden and you'll get to glimpse a little bit of the beauty of Lórien again. And I've imbued whatever I can imbue into it. That was really nice.
Yeah. The one thing that did rub me the wrong way about this whole piece was she didn't plan a gift for Gimli. She's clearly planned something for everyone else.
Hmm.
But she goes, "I've got nothing for you. What do you want?"
Yeah, that it didn't occur to me to read it that way when I read it the first time, but yeah, you're right.
But then, Gimli apparently he talks of her beauty and asks for just one of her hairs, which reads to us, I feel like, as modern audiences, is like a little bit creepy, but is a compliment in this context.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't read it creepy, but also I spend enough time thinking about hair in a historical context and things like hair jewelry and mourning and lovers giving each other locks of hair. And we already have hair being part of one of the gifts, being part of Legolas's bow.
True.
So to me, it doesn't feel weird. He's obviously not lusting after her, it's not a creepy thing. So
Yeah.
to me, it didn't feel weird, but I can see how, if you're not a person who thinks about hair like that all the time, it can feel kind of strange.
Yeah, I feel like if a man said, "Hey, I want some of your hair," I'd be like,
Be like,
it's
stay
been
away from
lovely
me,
talking to
please.
you. Goodbye."
Yeah, no, fuck that. But this is obviously exceptional circumstances.
Right, and he gives this just such beautifully phrased compliment to, Galadriel, and Galadriel says, "It is said that the skill of the dwarves is in their hands rather than in their tongues, yet that is not true of Gimli, and I'm sure Legolas can tell you exactly how skilled Gimli is with both his hands and his tongue."
Brain cell, I was about to say the exact same thing. Yeah. But
Well,
his gift is reconciliation between at least these elves and the dwarves. And there's a lot of grand statements about how no one's ever going to talk shit about dwarves in Lórien anymore. And if Gimli ever makes it safely home, he's going to tell everyone about how great the elves are. So that's good. We get a full resolution, at
yes.
least as it pertains to Gimli.
Yes. Yes. And Galadriel says to him, basically, you won't be greedy, but you will be wealthy. Good things will come to you because you deserve them, essentially.
Mhm.
Your hands shall flow with gold, and yet over you gold shall have no dominion. The treasures of the world will come to you, not because you are seeking them out. And as we've mentioned, the seeking of treasure to dwarves can sometimes be their doom, but treasure is still very important to dwarves. And so her kind of saying this is again, we've talked about sort of she seems to understand everyone
Mhm.
in a way that like other elves just don't. This is her once again understanding dwarves
Yeah.
in a way that nobody else in Lórien seems to. But the final gift is another magic item.
Yeah. Which honestly, I didn't think was as exciting as all the other stuff. But I'm sure it will have some really cool, awesome use later. Frodo gets this vial of light. Do you want to talk about that more?
It's light caught from Yarandil's star and set in the waters of her fountain where they saw shit.
Hmm.
A reminder that Yarandil is the father of Elrond. So this is her son-in-law's father's star.
Hmm.
Which, man, it's got to be weird to be fucking immortal
Yeah.
and like a part of the cosmology of the world. I know we talked a little bit like in the first half of the book when Glorfindel shows up about feeling almost like you stumbled into a myth
Hmm.
where Glorfindel is like, "Oh, he's a story."
Yeah.
He's that's Hercules showing up in this other random medieval tale. No, that's what every waking moment is for and around Galadriel.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different references to that where it says basically other places have the memory of ancient things. Galadriel is an ancient thing. Lórien is an ancient thing. This is totally unchanged. This isn't the faded glimpses of antiquity that you can get other places. This is the real deal, and you are never going to see anything like this again.
Right. We've talked about the rest of Middle Earth being essentially a post-apocalyptic world.
Hmm.
This is the final shadow of what the world could possibly have been like before. We end this by leaving them, and she gives a song that is translated directly afterwards. I read it and then immediately went and found the translation and then was like, wait, I literally could have just read the next line.
Oh, bestie.
But this is in Quenya, which is the other Elvish language. And this appears in our world too, where there's like languages used for ceremony and languages used for everyday speech. And that's what Quenya is. Quenya is the high tongue. Quenya is the language used for ceremony, for stories. And Sindarin is the everyday Elvish tongue used in Middle Earth.
Mhm.
So she's using Quenya for this song. But with this, they are officially out of Lórien. She fades into the distance, and they go around a bend in the river, and that's it. I don't have a ton of other notes for this chapter. I don't know if you have other things, but the one other piece that I have is Gimli wept openly, and then he says something, and it says, he said to Legolas, his companion. And that is about as close to a textual confirmation that those two are fucking as I think we're going to get.
Oh my god, they were companions.
They were companions.
Yeah. The only other thing that I had, which is very brief, we are running kind of long on this one. I was thinking about Galadriel and thinking about how awesome she is and how much I love her, and how, like Goldberry, she's beautiful, but she's not like sexy. She's not
Mhm.
being objectified. And this book obviously really lacks female characters, but Galadriel is awesome and she's really, really powerful and she's complex and she's a great ruler and everybody loves her, but she's not this perfect moral being that's, sort of Madonna whore complex. She's not this, moral light for everyone. She just is complicated and powerful and cool. And so I was thinking about all that. And then I remembered something that I learned in my 8th grade English class. We were talking about like the Canterbury Tales and courtly love, about depictions of women in those stories. And that something that my 8th grade English teacher said to me is that a queen is not a woman. And in terms of how writers and people experiencing these cultures, whether they are real cultures in the past or this fantasy culture, if you are reading these books about, you know, Galadriel, or who's the fucking lady in the King Arthur stories? What's her name?
Guinevere?
Guinevere, these like really amazing women. Um, that is not to be taken as an indication that normal everyday women are being respected in these cultures. These are really exceptional figures who are able to be judged by a different standard. So, as dope as Galadriel is, and as much as I love her, I don't know if I can necessarily take this to be an indication of Tolkien's view of women or women adjacent beings in the world of Lord of the Rings. But it's sort of an interesting thing to think about, that queen is sort of a separate category. Obviously, queens are women for, you know, many purposes, but it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Are we saying that there's a favorable presumption that they're separate and apart from other people by virtue of the position that they hold, the power that they hold?
Yes, exactly. So she is being judged differently based on her power, which is fine, but you know, I keep looking for any just regular old woman besides Lobelia Sackville Baggins to cling on to in this story, and so far none have turned up.
Well, I think we'll get to that when we get to that in the Two Towers,
Hopefully.
maybe. But with that talk about gender and elf gender, because as we know, elf gender is not the same as human gender, and elf queen gender is not the same.
Oh yes,
Distinctly.
absolutely.
Anything else for these two chapters of Fellowship?
Not that I can really think of. Mostly just that I love Gimli. I didn't expect him to be one of my favorites, because I think that in my previous totally ignorant of Lord of the Rings life, I was thinking about the Fellowship and going, okay, Aragorn, he's the hot one. Legolas is like the pretty boy. Frodo's the main character. Sam is his platonic bestie. Everyone kind of has their thing, except for Boromir. I never saw anybody fucking talk about Boromir. But I didn't feel like I really had any awareness of Gimli and what his deal was. But I love him. I think he's a really interesting character. I'm glad we've gotten to learn so much about him in the last couple of chapters. And I'm
Mhm.
glad that he and Legolas have resolved their differences.
That's one way to talk about what they're doing. So if you too would like to talk about what Legolas and Gimli are doing behind closed doors or up on completely open flats, you can do that with a lovely community of other interested parties on our social media at FanAppPod on X, TikTok, and Instagram. Instagram is definitely where I'm most active. I say I because I'm the one that manages the social media, so be nice.
I am eternally grateful for that service. Everyone be nice to Ryn, please. Social media is scary and I don't want to do it.
You can also email AO3 links or whatever else you would like to our email, thefandomapprentice@gmail.com. And you can leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you're using, comments on our YouTube channel, reviews on Apple Podcasts. You can please leave us a 5-star review if you would be so kind. Spread word of our podcast to your friends, enemies, family members, whoever you want to spread the podcast to. And other than that, anything else, Sam?
We're dropping episodes every other Tuesday. Now that this thing
Yes.
is out in the world, we have to remember to tell people that. Because
Yes, episodes are out every other Tuesday. And if that schedule gets messed up, that information will be on our social media. So if you want to stay up to date as to the chapters that we'll be covering on the next episode, so if you're reading along with the podcast, you can do so. If you want to stay up to date on releases and whatever other shenanigans happen to be occurring in my brain at any given time, check out our social media and subscribe to the podcast, and we'll be back in your ear holes in 2 weeks
yeah,
with
thanks for spending an hour and change of your time with us. We appreciate that. We're quality time people. That's one of our love
almost 2
languages.
full fucking hours.
Well, I mean, it's going to be edited down. It won't be that long, but a good chunk of time. Thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate that.
Yeah. We very much appreciate you choosing to spend this part of your day with us. And so all I have to say to you now is good night unto you all.
See you next time.
The Phantom Apprentice is produced and edited by Ryn and Sam. Our music was composed and performed by James, and our art is by Casey Turgeon. This podcast is created for non-commercial entertainment purposes, and the opinions expressed therein are our own and are not reflective of the opinions of any other person or organization. The content discussed is the property of the Tolkien estate and is used here under fair use.